when we go to Mars, we're going to need to build things, roads, buildings, landing pads, things like that. And obviously you don't want to bring all of the raw materials from Earth. You want to make some of that stuff on site. And so what do you got to work with, right? You've got the regolith and you've got the atmosphere and energy coming from the sun. And with those, hopefully you can craft those raw materials into something that is solid, that you can live inside and depend on. Because Martians are going to be spending a lot of time underground. So how do you build these kinds of structures? I mean, obviously there are various binding agents that we have here on Earth for concrete and things like that, but even that's going to be tricky on Mars. So a researcher named Dr. Congrui Jin at the University of Nebraska is working on growing various life forms within Martian regolith to solidify it into various shapes. Blocks and bricks and roads and various things that you might want to do using a bioreactor. It's a really cool idea and would allow you to really live off the land. And so we have an interesting conversation about what's going on to actually form these living bricks. And they really are living. Like even after you place them, you could come back and repair them. It's a really cool idea. All right, let's get into the interview. So is this your first NIAC grant that you've applied for?
Yes.
What led you to this, to actually going and applying to see if you could get this funding?
In the past few years, I was working on self-healing concrete. So when concrete generates cracks, we use bacteria or fungi to induce the biominerals to heal the cracks. And then we think about other possibilities like self-growing materials. So when we have soil particles or aggregates, we want to use fungi or bacteria to make them into a cohesive body. This will be very important if there is no human labor, especially on Mars. So they can do this automatically.
So let's talk about the project then. What are you proposing as an idea?
Okay, we propose that instead of shipping materials from Earth to Mars, we can directly use in situ materials. For example, the soil and the atmosphere on Mars, the water on Mars. Then we can just bring some bacteria or fungal spores, and they will build the bricks for us.
Well, let's break those up into the sort of two categories. So, how do you make bacteria build you something that you want?
I think it's a natural process for them. They will just work as a catalyst to promote the calcium carbonate formation. And those calcium carbonate crystals will work as a glue, bind those soil particles together. So
like limestone, like you're growing limestone to a shape that you want.
Yes.
And so how do you encourage it to make the shape that you want? Do you use some kind of mold, or what's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, you need to put the sand particles into a mold you want, and then the bacteria and the fungi will grow them into the shape of the mold.
Oh, I see. So you say you want to build a wall, you make a mold, you fill the wall with sand, and then the bacteria and the fungus are going to move through that shape and actually solidify. But I'm assuming you have some food for them that you're mixing in with the sand. So what is that?
So the food, because we want to use in situ materials on Mars, so we use cyanobacteria, which can utilize the CO2 and the nitrogen as the nutrient for them, and they will also generate organic carbon for the fungi. So both of them will have food, and with the food, they can promote the limestone crystals, which make the sand particles into a cohesive body.
So you're using both cyanobacteria and fungus at the same time in the same, right? And they don't compete with one another?
Yeah, we need to find those strains that they can get along with each other. It's called the mutualistic co-culturing.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, some of them can enhance the living of the partner.
And I guess, I mean, if you've got two different kinds of life, what does each one do to enhance the structure of the concrete? Like, why do you need bacteria and why do you need fungus?
Yeah, we need fungus because they, due to we actually use filamentous fungi because of the filamentous structure. They can promote large amounts of calcium carbonate crystals. So we need fungi, but we also need cyanobacteria because cyanobacteria can do photosynthesis. They can capture the CO2 and generate organic carbon for the fungi.
So let's imagine you're on Mars and you've brought whatever is the minimum amount of material that you need to get this process started. What will you have brought from Earth to get set up to build your living concrete?
Yeah, we need to bring spores of cyanobacteria and the fungi, but right now they cannot directly grow in the environment of Mars because of the low pressure and the radiation and everything. So we also need to bring a photobioreactor. So basically, they need to grow everything inside the bioreactor.
So you're growing the life in the bioreactor, and then you're putting it into the regolith, or are you actually having to like grow the shapes inside a bioreactor?
Yeah, we need to grow the shapes inside the bioreactor right now.
Right. And so, like, I'm assuming a bioreactor that can hold a wall or a brick is going to be pretty big.
Yeah, we need to make bricks and then assemble the bricks into the wall.
I see. Okay. And so then let's talk about speed. So like, so you've gone to Mars, you set up the bioreactor. Maybe it's big enough to build you one brick, or maybe you've got a few of them going. You could build a few bricks. How long does this process take when you start it up?
Yeah, it really depends on the nutrient, the temperature, the pressure. So we are still studying this process. We want to optimize the process, optimize the factors that influence the process so that they can do this much faster.
But you don't need to bring any of the nutrients from Earth. You can pull like everything that's needed to feed the fungus and the cyanobacteria is available on Mars.
Yes, exactly.
Assuming you can get access to water.
Yeah, they do have water on Mars from the melted ice on Mars.
Right.
So
like landing at the North Pole or the South Pole is probably the best way to approach this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then how do your ideas of like self-repairing concrete and stuff, how do you think, like, that's got to have a role to play as well in this? Do you think there's a point where these structures can heal themselves?
Oh, yeah. You mean the self-growing bricks? Yeah, if you don't kill the bacteria or fungi, they can, always generate those limestone crystals. So later, when the structure generates cracks, they can heal the cracks automatically. So this material is self-growing and self-healing, basically self-repair. So they have a lot of features that we don't have from the materials on Earth.
And is that because like the bacteria and the fungus just goes into like a dormant state when it's not getting any food? Like I know that there are experiments that have taken cyanobacteria and various kinds of fungus and they've put them on the International Space Station outside, and they can handle the temperatures and the low pressure and the radiation of space. And then you bring them back to Earth and then they get going again. And so even the worst place that we know of, cyanobacteria, it doesn't kill it. And so And so you could build your brick, but in fact, you've got all of the life still inside the brick. And then if there's a crack or whatever, you just pull the brick out, put it back in the bioreactor, fix it.
Yeah, and it's great that when the condition is not favorable, they don't die, they just form spores. And later, when the condition becomes better, when they have water and nutrient, they can be active again. So that's very interesting.
And I mean, it's a pretty exciting technology for going to a place like Mars where you really want to be able to live off the land, but you are still having to bring this environment, this bioreactor, to replicate what it would be like here on Earth. This technology must work really well here on Earth, where you don't need the bioreactor, right?
Yeah, it would be easier for us to do this on Earth, especially under some harsh conditions, like in some places, if we need to build a shelter, or after the disaster or something, this technology can do this automatically. And yeah.
I mean, I'm sort of imagining something where you would like have a form or whatever, and you would just pour sand into it, and then you would feed it you would mix in the spores and keep the food coming into it. But I guess it can harvest food, and then over time it will solidify. How does the strength of the concrete that you make compare to other building materials?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is something we are still studying. We want to have very strong bricks, just like the masonry units we are using right now on Earth. So that shouldn't be a problem, because the crystals they generated are calcium carbonate, which is very competitive with very compatible with the soil particles. And in the meantime, the bacteria and fungi also generate biopolymers, which can enhance the adhesion between those crystals. So I think they will be strong enough to make habitat of fittings.
Yeah. Now, what is the objective? Like with your NIAC grant, you're in that initial stage where you're just exploring. And what are, a lot of the questions that I'm asking you don't know the answers yet, because that's the whole point of the grant. So what are you hoping in the end that you will have learned as you go through the process of actually doing the work?
Yes, this is a phase 1 grant. So basically we are still exploring this idea to see if it works. I think the first step is to find the appropriate fungal strain and the bacterial strain which can live together and also generate those biocrystals and the biopolymers. We need to do a screening of a wide range of strains to find the most appropriate ones. And then we need to figure out the factors influencing the process, and we want to optimize the factors to find what's the best temperature, what's the best pressure, so that we can do this a lot faster. We also want to build a laboratory scale bioreactor to actually grow the bricks inside the reactor to see how long it takes, and also we want to test the final bricks to see if it's strong enough.
While you're working on this, there are people who are hoping that eventually they can send 1 million people to Mars and build giant cities, and people can live on Mars. And space is hard and Mars is really nasty. As you think about it as a materials scientist, we think about rocks and you think about various construction materials. What are parts of this future of human space exploration that I think people are underestimating? What do you think is going to be harder than we anticipate to live in space?
That's a good question. I think it's still the kind of the distance. We are really far from Mars. So I think we need to first test maybe Moon, which is closer to Earth, right? That would be easier. But Mars has some unique environment. So I need to think about this.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, like, I think when I talk to people who think about this stuff very deeply, right? Like, we've all been watching too much science fiction, and people are hopping in their spaceship and they're taking their warp drive and they're beaming down to the planet and they have their fusion drive and things are easy. But space is actually really hard, and every part of it is not conducive for life. And everything that we do here under Earth gravity with materials that are around us, we just take this stuff for granted. And yet none of that stuff will be available to us when we're in space and working in things in zero gravity, working in things on the moon. So it'd be interesting to see sort of, I guess you haven't gotten to a point where you're looking at something going, oh, I just can't imagine an astronaut trying to pile these bricks up out on the surface of the moon one by one. Anyway, that's maybe that's what this report will uncover. You'll get to a point where you're like, oh, this sounds really hard. I don't know if anyone is going to be able to do it. You mentioned, we had been talking about Mars, and you mentioned the moon as a way to test. I mean, does all of the technology work essentially the same on the moon as it does on Mars? Do you think? Like the regolith is different, the environment's slightly different?
Yes. The environment, the regolith will be different. So this technology is targeted for Mars. So because we studied the pressure, the atmosphere composition on Mars, so we think this will be fit into the Mars environment. Right,
because you don't have that atmosphere to feed the bacteria and the fungus. You're going to have to extract those gases from the rock if you're going to be doing this on the moon. Yeah. So then place your bets. When do you think this kind of technology would actually be used? If, let's say you're very successful with this project, you come up with some really good recommendations, what would a future experiment look like to prove your ideas actually on Mars, do you think?
Yeah, if this can really, you mean fly? First they need to kind of do some experiments to see if the biomineralization process really work under the gravity condition on Mars, even inside the bioreactor.
I think about like the MOXIE experiment on Perseverance, right? It has an experiment on the Perseverance rover that is making oxygen on Mars. And the only purpose is to test to see whether we can follow that process, to pull in carbon dioxide, run through the process to actually extract usable oxygen. I think it's, it makes enough for an atmosphere for one astronaut every couple of days. Like, it's not fast. So I wonder, like, if you were to try to prototype this idea on Mars, what would that experiment look like?
It would be kind of with a bioreactor, which can extract the components from the atmosphere, which can get water, and using the bioreactor, we can adjust the pressure, the temperature, the illumination, and everything. And we use the selected bacteria and fungal strains inside the reactor, and the mold, and the regolith particles, to see if they can work.
So I'm kind of imagining like maybe like a spacecraft that's got like a small lander, and then inside it's got like a bioreactor, and then a little mold, like maybe it's a NASA logo or something, and then it scoops up some regolith with a shovel, dumps it into a mold, feeds in the various materials, builds the little shape, and then plops it on the surface of Mars, and then builds another one until it runs out of water on board or something. Would that be the limiting factor, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe rolls across the surface of Mars, dropping tiny little NASA logos as it goes, or something else. Whatever would be a good shape. What would be a good first test shape, do you think? What would you like to see as the first thing that's constructed using this technique on Mars?
I don't know. What do you think?
That's why I said the NASA logo, but I'm sure there's something better. I don't know, like maybe Pokemons or something. I don't know, but you'd want something that's the same, it's the same shape. Little spheres, I guess, or little squares is probably the safe bet. Well, it's fascinating idea. When are you expecting to have completed your first level of research?
Oh, this grant is only for 9 months, I think. So within 9 months, we need to find the strains and build a bioreactor and test the bricks to see if it works. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so put a lot of thought into what shape you're going to make. I think this is important. So when you think about your mold, think about the shape. Make something really fun. Yeah,
I think Pokemon is a good idea because it can inspire the kids to be interested in space. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's maybe there's a copyright issue, but I'm sure you can come up with something that would be fun, that would be small and would be grown out of simulated Martian regolith that would show future. Just imagine this, but bigger and building shaped. That sounds great. All right. Well, Dr. Jin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and good luck with your research. I look forward to the results.
Thank you so much.
You can get even more space news in my weekly email newsletter. I send it out every Friday to more than 60,000 people. I write every word, there are no ads, and it's absolutely free. Subscribe at universetoday.com/newsletter. You can also subscribe to the Universe Today podcast. There you can find an audio version of all of our news, interviews, and Q&As, as well as exclusive content that we don't publish anywhere else. Subscribe at universetoday.com/podcast or search for Universe Today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. A huge thanks to everyone who supports us on Patreon and helps us stay independent. Thanks to all the interplanetary researchers, the interstellar adventurers, and the galaxy wanderers. And a special thanks to Tim Whalen, Dave Verabioff, Joff Schultz, and Andrew M. Gross, who support us at the Master of the Universe level. All your support means the universe to us.